It was an ordinary morning, but something that day made me feel that everything was about to change. I, a forest ranger passionate about nature, had always believed that forests held deep secrets, mysteries that could leave us unsettled. But that morning, I had no idea that the Yosemite forest would present me with a mystery that would challenge not only my ability to understand nature, but also the limits of reason. The sun was still shy, filtering its first rays through the leaves of the trees, when I received a call that put me on alert. A young woman named Emily had vanished while walking on a popular trail. What began as a simple search quickly transformed into something much more sinister. The desperation of her family was palpable, and I found myself compelled to do everything I could to find her. As I walked along the trail, the feeling that something was wrong grew within me. The forest, which once seemed a place of tranquility, now felt wrapped in an oppressive silence, as if it were guarding a secret it did not want to reveal. The tall, imposing trees seemed to whisper among themselves, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching me, as if they were witnesses to something that had occurred there. As I delved deeper into my search, I came across accounts of other people who had disappeared on the same trails. The number of disappearances was not just alarming, it was inexplicable. As a forest ranger, my responsibility was to protect the wildlife and the people who visited the park, but now I found myself faced with a mystery that challenged all my beliefs. As the days went by, the search for Emily grew increasingly desperate. I spent hours scouring the forest, questioning other visitors, and trying to understand what could have led the young woman to disappear. During one of my walks, I found a place that seemed different, a clearing surrounded by ancient, thick trees, where the sunlight seemed to struggle to penetrate. It was there that I came across something unsettling, a series of marks on the ground, which appeared to indicate that something or someone had been dragged away. What could have happened there? The human mind tends to seek logical explanations, but as the mystery deepened, I began to consider possibilities that had once seemed absurd. What if the forest hid something that transcended our understanding, something that defies logic and reason? That night, after yet another day of fruitless searching, I decided to camp in the forest. I needed time to reflect and perhaps find a new approach to the situation. As the campfire crackled and the stars shone brightly in the sky, I began to feel a presence around me. The silence of the forest became increasingly palpable, and a chill ran down my spine. It was as if nature itself was warning me about something I still couldn't comprehend. I woke in the middle of the night to a noise. Something was moving in the shadows, but when I tried to identify the source of the sound, I couldn't see anything. Fear began to take hold of me, and I remembered all the stories I had heard about the forest. Stories of inexplicable disappearances, of urban legends speaking of creatures that inhabited the depths of nature, always watching, always waiting. In the following days, the search for Emily increasingly felt like a struggle against an invisible enemy. Not only was the despair of her family affecting me, but also the pressure to uncover the truth behind the disappearances. What was real and what was merely a construct of my mind? I was beginning to lose myself in a labyrinth of uncertainties. Finally, after weeks of searching, a lead emerged. A group of hunters reported seeing a strange figure near the clearing where I found the marks. That figure moved quickly among the trees, like a fleeting shadow. I decided it was time to confront my fears and return to that place. Upon arriving at the clearing, my heart raced. The atmosphere was dense, and I could feel the weight of silence. Then something moved again. I was about to take a step toward the sound when a feeling of vertigo overwhelmed me. What I was about to discover could change everything. What was real? What was merely an illusion? The answer lay before me, but the fear of uncovering the truth paralyzed me. In that moment, I realized that the forest, with its mysteries and secrets, was not just a backdrop for my search. It was a character, alive and pulsating, guarding stories that may never be told. And I, a mere forest ranger, was about to plunge into a reality that could consume me. As I looked into the approaching darkness, I knew that the search for Emily was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge not only my sanity, but also my understanding of what truly inhabits the shadows of nature. The cool morning breeze enveloped me as I returned to the clearing, a space that had now become a kind of portal to the unknown. With each step, anxiety pulsed within me, as if the forest were reacting to my presence. The silence was deafening, and even the birds seemed to have abandoned the area, as if they knew something was about to happen. When I arrived, a figure emerged from the shadows, and my heart raced. He was a weathered-looking man, dressed in dusty clothes and with a gaze that reflected the same unease I felt. He introduced himself as Ben, a former resident of the area who now wandered the forest in search of answers to the disappearances. He had lost his sister years ago, and his pain seemed still fresh, like a wound that had never healed. "You're looking for her too, are you?" he asked, his voice low and heavy with emotion. I nodded, and he continued, "Many people have disappeared here. There's something in this forest, something we cannot see, but that knows our fears and desires. I feel that Emily is not the only one." The idea that the forest might have its own consciousness began to haunt me. What if nature was somehow rebelling against us? The mere mention that more people could have disappeared made the weight of what I was facing even more oppressive. What I thought was a search for Emily was now transforming into a much darker investigation. Ben suggested we follow a path he had discovered, a lesser-known trail that led to an old cabin, where rumors said the missing were last seen. The idea of exploring such an isolated place made me nervous, but the need for answers propelled me forward. When we arrived at the cabin, the atmosphere was dense and charged with a strange energy. The windows were broken, and the door creaked as it opened, revealing an interior consumed by dust and abandonment. There were marks on the floor, similar to those I had found in the clearing. The objects were piled chaotically, as if someone had tried to leave the cabin in a hurry. "She was here," Ben said, his voice trembling. "I can feel it. I feel we're close." As we investigated, I found a diary, its pages yellowed and worn. It was the account of a traveler who described encounters with a strange presence in the forest. He spoke of whispering voices, of a force that drew him into the depths of the woods. With each line I read, the logic underpinning my search began to crumble. What was real? What was merely a product of imagination? However, as we delved deeper into the notes, a sound cut through the air. It was a scream, sharp and filled with despair. The echo reverberated through the trees, and my stomach turned. Ben and I exchanged glances, and the decision was instantaneous. We needed to investigate. Following the sound, we arrived at a clearing illuminated by moonlight, where a horrifying scene was unfolding. A group of people was gathered around a campfire, but what truly caught my attention was what moved among the shadows. A tall, skeletal silhouette loomed against the trees, his eyes shining with a supernatural intensity. The presence was there, watching, waiting. The group seemed hypnotized, as if they were in a trance. I knew something terrible was about to happen, and the need to protect Emily and the others intensified within me. "Dan, we need to get out of here," I whispered, but he was already frozen by the scene before us. One of the group members began to murmur words I could not understand, like a chant that seemed to invoke something from the depths of the forest. The air grew heavy, and a sense that nature itself was closing in on us began to consume me. The trees seemed to lean in, as if wanting to participate in that macabre ritual. I felt that the forest was alive in a way I had never comprehended before. That invisible force I feared was not just present. It was manifesting in a tangible way, threatening to swallow everything in its path. Reason began to falter, and the line between the real and the supernatural dissolved. What was this place? What was happening to those people? And, more importantly, where was Emily? The search for answers was now becoming a fight for survival, and I knew I was about to confront not only the mysteries of the forest, but also my own deepest fears. With my heart racing and adrenaline pumping through my veins, Ben and I slowly backed away, determined to find a way out of this trap that the forest had prepared for us. Whatever was unfolding there, I knew it was just the beginning of something much greater and far more terrifying than I could imagine. The atmosphere in the clearing was heavy, and fear transformed into an almost palpable feeling that enveloped me. As my gaze fixed on that skeletal silhouette, a wave of panic hit me. It was as if the forest was watching us, waiting for the right moment to act. Ben remained paralyzed, fascinated by what was unfolding before us, and I knew I needed to act quickly. "Ben, we need to get out of here," I whispered again, pulling him by the arm, but he didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the figure that seemed to dance among the shadows, as if weaving a spell over everyone present. The chanting of the entranced man intensified, and the skeletal figure stepped forward, revealing a face that looked like a mask of pain and despair. With a surge of impulse, I dragged Ben back toward the forest. But as we moved away, something made me stop. A voice echoed in my mind, soft as a breeze, but filled with a power I couldn't ignore. "You also belong to this place," the voice whispered. "You cannot escape what is within you." I felt a chill run down my spine. What did that entity mean? What did I have to do with all of this? The disappearances, Ben's pain, the search for Emily. Everything seemed interconnected in ways I didn't understand. I was not just a mere spectator. There was something deeper that linked me to that forest. I decided that we couldn't just run away. We needed to understand. "Ben," I said, almost shouting to pull him from his trance. "We need to find out what's happening here. We have to find Emily and understand why this is happening." He finally seemed to awaken, his expression of astonishment turning into determination. "You're right. We can't let this continue. If there's something here, we need to confront it." We slowly returned to the clearing cautiously. The group was still in a trance, and the skeletal figure was now floating closer to the campfire, as if absorbing the energy of the ritual. The air was charged with a strange electricity, and the feeling that we were about to cross a threshold intensified with every step. "Do you know who this entity is?" I asked Ben, trying to seek an answer from the depths of his memory. "It seems familiar." He hesitated before responding. "A long time ago, when I was still a child, I heard stories about the guardian of the forest. They say he feeds on lost souls, and those who venture too deep into the woods can end up becoming part of him. My sister, she always believed in those stories. I warned her, but she never listened to me." The revelation cut like a blade. The guardian of the forest. It wasn't just a legend. It was a terrifying reality. I had heard whispers about this creature, but I never thought it could be true. And now, the idea that Emily could be connected to this being terrified me. "If Emily is here," my voice faltered, "what do we have to do?" Ben looked at me, his eyes reflecting a mix of terror and courage. "We need to interrupt the ritual. If we let them continue, we'll lose not just Emily, but everyone who has ever entered here." With a vague plan in mind, we decided to approach the group. The chanting was intensifying, and I could see that the people looked paler, as if their vitality was being drained. An invisible force kept them there, trapped in a state of hypnosis. "Ben, can you distract that man?" I asked, pointing to the one leading the chant. "I'll try to reach the campfire." She nodded, and in a swift motion, he lunged toward the group, shouting to grab their attention. The man who was chanting turned, confused, and the distraction worked. I seized the opportunity and ran toward the campfire, feeling the intense heat on my face as I approached the flame. But as I got closer, I realized that the true threat wasn't just the skeletal figure. It was the forest itself. The trees seemed to sway, and a biting wind began to blow, as if nature was rebelling against our presence. Shadows stretched in impossible directions, and the feeling that something was about to engulf us grew stronger. As I tried to push the embers with a piece of wood, a cold hand gripped my shoulder. I looked back and saw the skeletal figure, its face now closer than I ever imagined. Its eyes glowed with a supernatural light, and I knew I was about to confront the true horror. "You cannot escape," the voice echoed, reverberating in my mind. "You belong to me." Despair enveloped me, but amidst the fear, a spark of clarity emerged. I was not alone. Ben was fighting against the man who had led the chant, and the people around us began to awaken from their trance, confused and scared. "Emily," I shouted, feeling the need to call her name. "If you're here, you need to fight. Don't let them take you." The figure hesitated, And in that moment, I realized that the forest was dividing between light and darkness. Whatever was happening there was not just a battle for survival, but a struggle for the soul of all of us. And if I wanted to save Emily and uncover the secrets of the forest, I would need to face not only the Guardian, but also my own fears. With all the strength I could muster, I raised the wood toward the campfire and shouted, "We will not surrender. The forest does not own us." And as the flames illuminated the clearing, I realized that the true confrontation was just beginning. The light of the flames seemed to dance, casting grotesque shadows that stretched and twisted around me. The intense heat of the campfire enveloped me, but the presence of the skeletal figure was like ice consuming my heart. I was about to face the Guardian of the forest, but there was something more, something beyond what I could comprehend. "You cannot escape," the voice echoed once more, now clearer and deeper, as if the forest itself were speaking through that entity. "You are a part of me." I felt a pressure in my chest, as if the forest were trying to pull me inside it, to become part of its eternal mystery. Despair turned into a sense of inevitability, and for a moment, I thought all was lost. But then, an image emerged in my mind. Emily's face, her laughter, the way she looked at me with hope. I could not leave her behind, not now. Then, I shouted, and I saw him struggling against the creature leading the chant. His expression determined. "We need to do this together." He nodded, and we both turned toward the campfire, resolute in our mission. But before we could act, the skeletal figure raised its arms, and a howling wind began to swirl around us. The leaves of the trees violently rustled, and the clearing became a whirlwind of shadows and whispers. I could barely keep my footing, but something inside me ignited. I needed answers and not just an escape. "Why are you doing this?" I shouted, my voice nearly lost in the storm that was forming. "What do you want from us?" The entity hesitated, and then, with a voice that sounded like many, began to speak. "I am not what you imagine, young one. I am the Guardian, yes, but I am not a monster. I am the protector of this forest, the guardian of the souls that have lost themselves here. Those who venture forth without respect, without understanding the true essence of this place, become mine. But you are different." I felt my heart race. What did that mean? Different how? I asked, trying to decipher what was happening. The light of the campfire seemed to intensify, and the figure began to materialize into something more human, more like a living being, rather than a mere specter. "You carry the essence of the forest within you," it continued, its eyes shining with a hypnotic intensity. "Your bonds with it are deeper than you realize. Your sister, she also came here and I preserved her. What you seek is not just Emily, but the truth buried within your own being." My thoughts became a jumble. The idea that my sister, who had disappeared so long ago, could somehow be linked to this entity made me feel as if the ground were disintegrating beneath my feet. "Emily, is she alive?" The entity smiled, but it was a sad smile, full of understanding and pain. "She is part of the forest now, just as you may be. The souls that come into harmony with nature here become part of it. But this is not the end. It is a new form of existence." Ben finally landed a blow that knocked down the man leading the chant, and the group around us began to awaken from their trance, confused and frightened. The ritual was being interrupted, but the tension was rising. The Guardian's revelation made me feel torn between the need to save Emily and the idea that she might have chosen this. "If you can bring back those who have gone, then do it," I pleaded, pain and hope intertwined in my voice. "Bring my sister back. I cannot simply return what you do not understand." The entity replied, its voice now carrying a deep weight. "You must comprehend what it means to be part of the forest. You must also make a choice. Stay here or return to the world you know." "I can't leave her," I cried, anguished. "I cannot abandon her in a place like this." The figure approached, its presence almost warm now. "Then fight, but not just against me. Fight against your own fears, your doubts. The forest is not your enemy. It is a reflection of who you truly are. Only then can you save your sister and yourself." As everything around us became a whirlwind of emotions, I realized that the struggle was not just against the entity or the forest. It was an internal battle, a quest for who I truly was and what I was willing to sacrifice for those I loved. Panic and anger became fuel, and determination began to grow within me. I will not give up, I declared, a new strength coursing through my veins. I will understand. If Emily is here, if the forest is part of us, then I will fight for her and for all who have been lost. With those words, the clearing erupted in light, and the skeletal figure dissolved into a wave of energy that enveloped me. The forest began to pulse, and something deep and ancient awakened within me. The battle was just beginning, and the truth I sought was about to be revealed in a way I could never have imagined. The pulsating light emanating from the clearing seemed to have a life of its own, enveloping me in an almost hypnotic glow. My emotions were raw, a mix of determination and terror intertwining like the roots of the trees around me. I needed to find a way to overcome the guardian of the forest while unraveling the mysteries surrounding my sister. You need to understand, the guardian's voice echoed in my mind, more intense than before. You are not just fighting against me, but against the ghosts of your past, the fears that haunt you. They are more powerful than you imagine. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the cacophony of voices and whispers that seemed to come from all sides. Memories of Emily, of our childhood, of happy moments flooded my mind. But along with those memories came doubts. What if I was wrong? What if she had chosen to stay here in the forest instead of coming back with me? These questions sliced through my soul like sharp blades. I can't give up, I shouted again, feeling the pressure rise in my chest. I won't let you manipulate me. The skeletal figure twisted, as if absorbing my resistance. You don't understand, young one. The struggle you face is just the beginning. What is at stake here is much greater than your life or your sister's life. It is the essence of the forest, the balance between the world of the living and the dead. The words reverberated in my mind, and a wave of adrenaline coursed through me. I needed to act. I needed to find a way to confront this entity, but how? I looked at Ben, who was still fighting against the others who were still under the spell of the chant. He was surrounded but fought with a bravery that inspired me. If I wanted to rescue Emily, I couldn't do it alone. Then, I shouted, trying to get his attention. We need to unite. The forest is not just a prison. It is a living being, and we have to understand what it wants from us. He turned his head, even as he struck one of the attackers. How can we do that? We are at a disadvantage. We need to find the center of the clearing. That's where we can confront the guardian directly. Where the energy is strongest. Hope began to blossom within me, even amidst the chaos. Let's go together. With renewed determination, I ran toward the heart of the clearing, where the light seemed most intense. Each step was a battle against the shadows trying to pull me down, but I wouldn't let that happen. The connection to the forest, the feeling that part of me had always belonged to this place, grew stronger with each moment. When I reached the center, a wave of energy nearly knocked me over. The light was so bright it felt like I could touch it, and in the depths, I saw glimpses of familiar faces, whispers of voices echoing in my mind. It was as if the forest was showing me everything I had lost, everything I loved. You are almost there, but you still don't understand. The guardian's voice resonated, now clear and penetrating. You seek the truth, but the truth has a price. What are you willing to sacrifice? Looking at the light, I realized that the answer was not just about me or Emily. It was about all those who had disappeared, about the forest that sheltered their souls. The weight of responsibility crushed my heart, and doubt transformed into a thread of terror. What was I really willing to give? I don't know, I shouted, feeling the pressure increase. I don't want to choose between my sister and the others. That is the essence of your dilemma. You seek the truth, but the truth is a burden. You must decide if you are ready to bear that burden. My hands trembled, confusion eating away at my determination. I couldn't remain paralyzed, not now. I looked at Ben, who was approaching, breathless but determined. His strength gave me courage. If I wanted to save Emily, I would need to face not only the Guardian but also the shadows within me. "We're in this together," I shouted, and he nodded, understanding. "If the forest needs a sacrifice, let it be me. I won't let you take my sister without a fight." A wave of power surged from within me, and I lunged toward the light, determined to confront the truth the forest held. The Guardian drew closer, his skeletal form now more human-like, with eyes that shone like stars. "Welcome, then," he said, his voice a deep whisper. "Prepare for the truth that transforms and consumes." And in that moment, I realized that the battle unfolding was not just a physical struggle, but a fight for my very soul. Time was running out, and I needed to find a way that united not just me and Emily, but all those the forest had embraced. The clearing was about to reveal its secrets, and I needed to be ready for what came next. The pulsing light around me seemed to intensify, and a sense of vertigo overwhelmed me. The Guardian, now closer, was an imposing figure, his penetrating gaze making my heart race. Beside me, Ben was ready, his features hardened by determination and fear. We knew that what was about to happen would decide the fate not only of my sister but of all the lost souls the forest held. "Do you really think you can challenge me?" The Guardian smiled, but there was no joy in his expression. It was a face that spoke of many centuries of pain and suffering. "You are just a young man, confused and fragile. The weight of what you ask is greater than you imagine." I took a deep breath, feeling the energy of the clearing pulse in tune with my heart. "I am not just a young man. I am Emily's brother, and I will not leave her here. The truth may be a burden, but I am willing to carry it." Those words seemed to resonate through the forest, and a whisper of wind passed by me, as if the very spirits of the forest were supporting me. The Guardian hesitated for a moment, and I seized the opening. "Tell me what happened to my sister. Why hasn't she returned? What are you hiding from her?" The Guardian's eyes glowed, and the light around me began to shift. Shadows twisted, creating images of familiar faces, laughter, and tears. I saw Emily, still a child, running through the forest, free and happy. But then, the image distorted, and I saw a moment of despair. Her expression, lost and confused, surrounded by lost souls pleading for help. "She came here seeking answers, just like you," the Guardian said, and his voice now sounded softer, almost sad. "But the truth is hard to bear. What you see is the essence of the forest, a connection between all who have gone and those who are yet to come. Her choice was to sacrifice herself in the hope that you would find your way." A wave of pain hit me, and I felt warm tears streaming down my face. "No, that can't be true. I can't believe she would choose this. You must understand, young one," the Guardian continued, his voice now heavy with meaning. "The forest is not just a place of beauty. It is also a place of pain and sacrifice. Every soul that remains here does so for a reason. What you must decide is whether you are willing to join them or if you would rather fight against it." A feeling of despair washed over me. What was I willing to sacrifice? The love for my sister, or the chance to save her? I looked at Ben, who was beside me, and realized he was also struggling with the same doubt. The forest pulsed with energy, and the clearing seemed alive, waiting for my choice. "I can't do this alone," I said, my voice trembling. "Ben, what would you do? What should we choose?" He moved closer, placing a hand on my shoulder. "The choice is not just yours, it's ours. If Emily sacrificed herself, maybe it's because she believed in you. She believed you could find a way to unite these souls, to bring them into the light." The Guardian watched, his expression impassive, but there was a spark of curiosity in his eyes. A new time was running out. The light around us was becoming almost blinding, and the shadows were about to close in on us. "If you want the truth, then you must face it," the Guardian said. "But be aware, the truth does not come without a price." "I accept the price," I declared, feeling that the choice had already been made. "If it means I can save Emily and bring peace to these souls, I accept." The light exploded in a wave of energy, and the clearing transformed into a whirlwind of images and sounds. I felt Emily's memories flooding my mind, echoes of laughter and tears, and a feeling of love that transcended time. The truth began to reveal itself before me, and I realized that the forest was not just a place of suffering, but also of hope. "Then let it be," said the guardian, his voice now a distant echo. "The burden you carry is heavy, but it is also the path to redemption." The light intensified, and I found myself surrounded by the souls of the forest, including Emily's. She looked at me, and in her gaze was a mixture of love and farewell. "You found the way, brother. Now it is your turn to bring the light to those who are lost." And in that moment, I felt as if the clearing was merging with me. I was not fighting just for myself or for Emily, but for all who had ever been lost. The pulsing energy of the forest flowed through me, and I knew that the truth, though painful, was also liberating. The clearing lit up, and the shadows began to dissipate. The guardian watched, his skeletal form now becoming more ethereal. "You have completed your journey. The choice has been made, and the cycle renews." And with that, the light enveloped the forest, bringing a new beginning. I knew the struggle was not over, but I had found the strength I needed to carry on. Emily was with me, and together we would face whatever came next. The light that once seemed like a blessing now became blinding and oppressive. As the clearing lit up, a wave of heat and energy enveloped me, and I felt the memories of all those who had been lost in the forest intertwining with my own. It was as if I had absorbed their experiences, their pains, and their joys, and this new awareness left me staggering. When the glow finally dissipated, I found myself standing in the center of the clearing, the shadows that had once surrounded me now reduced to distant echoes. Emily's image was still alive in my mind, her serene and confident expression. The guardian had vanished, but his presence lingered, like a shadow I knew would never leave me. Ben was by my side, his gaze filled with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling. But I knew the answer was not simple. What I felt was a whirlwind of emotions, a mix of relief and a deep emptiness. We had faced something that few would dare to confront, and yet the victory was not complete. I looked around at the forest that had once seemed so familiar, now transformed into a labyrinth of secrets and echoes of souls. The air was heavy, and the sensation that something was still present, watching, made me shiver. The forest pulsed with a new energy, but also with a profound sadness, as if it were mourning the sacrifices that had been made. "Emily, she's gone, isn't she?" The question slipped from my lips like a whisper. Ben hesitated, and the answer that did not come only increased the weight in my chest. What I had achieved did not bring back my sister, only a glimpse of how her journey had touched the lives of so many. "She is at peace now," Ben said, but his voice carried an uncertainty that did not comfort me. "You did what you could, and she knew you would come." The emotional scars from that battle remained visible, even if they could not be seen. I had faced the guardian, but the cost of that was a burden I would have to carry. The look we exchanged, the connection we felt, all of it would become a painful memory, a reminder that not all stories have a happy ending. When we finally left the clearing, the forest seemed different. The trees, once majestic, now appeared as shadows of something I could not fully grasp. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, but there was something dark about the way it illuminated the path ahead. I knew the forest held secrets that might never be revealed, and that uncertainty followed me like a shadow. The journey back home was silent. Each step felt heavier than the last, and the weight of Emily's absence became almost unbearable. What I had learned was that the truth, though liberating, did not heal all wounds. The questions I had about what really happened, about what led her to sacrifice herself, remained unanswered and that left me restless. That night, as I lay down, the feeling that the forest was still watching me did not leave. The memories of Emily were vivid in my mind, but the pain of loss mingled with a new understanding. I was no longer the same. That place, with its shadows and lights, had changed me forever. The fight I had waged was not just against a guardian or a dark force. It was a battle against the uncertainty of life and the fragility of what we love. And so, as the shadows danced on the walls of my room, I realized that the forest would continue to exist, filled with lost souls and untold stories. I, on the other hand, had found a new understanding of love, pain, and courage. But even with that clarity, there was a part of me that could not ignore. The feeling that something was still lurking, ready to remind me that, deep in the forest, the darkest truths never really go away. I woke up the next morning with light filtering through the curtains, but the feeling of oppression still lingered in the air. The image of Emily, serene and confident, would not leave me. What I had learned in the forest was not just about the fight against the guardian, but about the fragility of life and the strength of love that endures, even after loss. However, the clarity I felt was accompanied by a weight, an anguish that I knew would follow me for a long time. As I walked through the city, the faces that once seemed so familiar were now distant shadows. The laughter and conversations around me had become an indistinct buzz, as if I were seeing the world through a foggy glass. The memories of the forest were still fresh in my mind, and the certainty that something deeper was lurking left me restless. Life continued around me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more I still didn't understand. The fear I had felt in the clearing was now manifesting at every corner, in every moving shadow. I knew that even far from the forest would never be far from me. What I had faced was just a part of a larger cycle, and I wondered, how many other souls had been lost? How many other stories were waiting to be told? Life went on, but Emily's absence continued to echo. On quiet nights, I found myself looking at the stars, seeking a connection, hoping that even in another realm, she could feel my love. And amid my thoughts, I realized that the pain of loss was just one facet of something greater. I had learned to honor her memory, to carry her lessons with me, but the shadow of the forest still watched over me. One night, as I got lost in reflection, an idea emerged. What if the forest was more than a place of pain? What if, within its depths, there was a space where souls met, where stories didn't end with death, but intertwined and transformed? The idea that Emily was somewhere, not as a loss, but as part of something greater, gave me a new purpose. I decided that I couldn't let fear paralyze me. The memories I carried were a gift, a connection to those who came before me. The forest, with its shadows and secrets, would no longer be a symbol of loss, but a place of rebirth. I could transform pain into strength, and perhaps one day, find a way back to the clearing, not as a fugitive of fear, but as someone seeking to understand. As I looked to the horizon, a new understanding formed within me. Life, with its uncertainties, was a labyrinth of experiences, and even though the forest held mysteries, I was no longer alone. Emily's presence, though physically absent, became a force within me, guiding me through the unknown. And so, with a heavy but determined heart, I decided to share this journey, not just as an act of remembrance, but as an invitation to all who would listen to my story. Life is made up of encounters and farewells, and each of us carries the shadow of those we love. Don't let the fear of the unknown stop you from exploring. Share your stories, your memories, and together, we can illuminate the shadows that surround us. I invite you to reflect on your own experiences. What have you learned from your losses? How have you transformed pain into strength? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your voice is important, and by sharing it, we can create a network of support and understanding. Don't hesitate to like and subscribe. Together, we can explore the depths of the stories that connect us. The forest never disappears, but we can learn to navigate its paths, always in search of the light that shines, even in the shadows. Have you ever wondered what would happen if, on an ordinary day, you found yourself surrounded by a deafening silence, where nature, which once seemed so welcoming, transformed into an abyss of mystery and fear? I am a forest ranger, and my story intertwines with the disappearance of people in a national park that many consider a paradise. As I learned the hard way, this place hides secrets that can destabilize even the bravest souls. It was a cold, foggy morning in Shenandoah National Park, a place I had always loved. The tall trees seemed to whisper ancient stories, and the scent of damp leaves mingled with the fresh mountain air. I had decided to take a morning patrol, a habit that brought me peace and connection with nature. But that day, something felt different. The air was heavy, as if the park itself were holding its breath. As I walked, I noticed the silence was oppressive. There were no birds singing, nor the rustling of leaves. Just me and the echo of my own unease. The idea that something might be wrong began to haunt me. When I reached a clearing, I found an abandoned object, a dirty, crumpled baseball cap. My heart raced. Though it was an ordinary item, it felt like a warning sign. Questions began to flood my mind. Where was the person who had worn it? In the following days, my work turned into a frantic search. Reports of disappearances began to surface, one after another, each more distressing than the last. Friends, family members, and even tourists who had ventured into the park's trails vanished without a trace. I couldn't understand how this was possible. Nature, which had always been my refuge, now seemed like a treacherous maze. Investigations began to consume my life. I found myself immersed in accounts of people who had entered the park and never returned. Stories of hikers who, while following familiar trails, found themselves in unknown places, as if time and space had distorted around them. With each account, I felt a strange connection, as if I were somehow destined to uncover the truth behind so many disappearances. One night, while examining maps and notes, something caught my attention. There was an area of the park that seemed to have been avoided by everyone. I decided to investigate. With flashlights and a group of volunteers, I ventured into the place that many considered cursed. The atmosphere was heavy and threatening, as if the very spirits of the forest were watching us. As we advanced, the feeling of being followed intensified. The wind blew with an unusual force, carrying whispers that seemed to come from distant places. The tension grew with each step. When we finally found a clearing, something made me stop. An indistinct figure stood before us, almost like an echo from the past. It was a woman, but her presence was ethereal, as if she were trapped between two worlds. I tried to approach, but before I could say anything, she vanished, leaving only a trail of cold and despair. The feeling that something deeper and darker was at play consumed me. I knew it was not just a matter of disappearances. There was a dark force at work, something that fed on the fears and doubts of those who entered that park. I began to question whether I too would be the next to disappear. The search for the truth became a matter of survival. The stories of other missing people began to intertwine with my own reality, as if nature were trying to warn me of something terrible. I was no longer just a spectator. I was at the center of a mystery that defied logic. Something inside me began to crack, and I realized that the line between what was real and what was not was fading away. Determined to uncover what was really happening, I delved into local legends, stories about a lost city in the mountains, people who should never have crossed the park's boundaries, and entities that wandered in the shadows surrounded me. Each account brought more questions than answers, and I realized that the truth could be more terrifying than I had ever imagined. As I struggled against rising despair and fear, one certainty took hold in my mind. I needed to find the missing people, not only to save their lives, but to save my own sanity. What I didn't know was that the answer I sought could forever change my perception of what it means to be lost, not only physically but also in the deep, dark labyrinth of the human mind and nature itself. I was at a turning point. The tension that had accumulated in my chest became palpable, like a stretched rope about to snap. The nights passed in sleeplessness, and every time I tried to sleep, the image of that ethereal woman haunted me. What did she want from me? And, more importantly, where were all those who had disappeared? Each day, more reports reached me, and the sense of urgency grew. A group of tourists who vanished during a camping trip. A young man who ventured alone on a trail and never returned. The stories seemed to intertwine, forming a web of despair that pulled me deeper. I knew I needed help, but what could someone do who was already as lost as I was? That was when I met Clara, a local reporter who was investigating the disappearances. She was determined and had a piercing gaze, as if she was always searching for answers. Our conversations became frequent, and soon we realized we were on a joint quest. Clara had access to old records and documents that spoke about the history of the park, and as we delved into the information, reality seemed to distort even more. One night, while analyzing an old map, Clara noticed an area marked with a strange symbol. "Have you ever heard of Eldergrove City?" she asked, her voice laden with curiosity. The name was unfamiliar to me, but upon hearing it, a chill ran down my spine. It was as if I had heard that name in one of the reports I had read. "They say it's a place where time and space intertwine," Clara continued. "People who enter there, some never come back. Others, when they return, are not the same." With each word, the atmosphere around us seemed to shift. The air grew denser, and the lantern light flickered, as if something was about to be revealed. Clara and I decided that night that we would go to that area the next day. It was risky, but the need for answers outweighed any fear. The next morning, we set off together, facing the fog that seemed to engulf us. Upon arriving at the marked location on the map, we felt a change. The silence surrounding us was even more oppressive than before. The trees seemed closer, as if they wanted to trap us. The flora that we had admired before now seemed to have a presence of its own, a consciousness that watched us. Soon, we found traces indicating that others had been there. A piece of torn clothing, a forgotten backpack, and, more disturbingly, footprints that seemed to lead nowhere. Fear began to consume me, but Clara remained steadfast. "We need to keep going," she said, her gaze determined. "We're close to discovering something. We can't give up now." We traversed a path that seemed to get lost in a tangle of roots and bushes. And it was at that moment that something happened. A sudden change in the air, as if a wave of cold had hit us. Clara stopped and I followed her, confused. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her eyes wide. "I heard it. A whisper, almost like a distant melody, but laden with pain and despair. It was as if the voices of the lost souls were finally manifesting." Terror settled in me, and I realized that perhaps we were not the only ones there. The spirit of the woman I had seen before seemed to call to us, and the echo of her lament intensified. The path ahead grew darker, and the feeling of being watched was palpable. Clara and I exchanged glances, and a silent understanding passed between us. We were about to uncover something beyond human comprehension, something that could devour us. That pivotal moment turned into a test of courage. What had once been mere disappearances was now becoming a terrifying reality, and I was beginning to understand that the nature around us was not just a backdrop, but a living force deeply involved in our quest. Eldergrove City was not a legend. It was a place of power, a portal to the unknown. As we advanced, the clues became more confusing. The ground beneath our feet seemed to shift, and the trail distorted, as if the forest itself was playing tricks on us. Clara turned to me, her eyes filled with determination but also doubt. "What if we can't get back?" she questioned. The answer I wanted to give caught in my throat. I did not know if we would make it, but one thing was certain: we could not stop now. The mystery surrounding us grew deeper and more threatening with each step, and as the forest whispered around us, I realized that the search for the lost souls was also a struggle for our own sanity. The line between the real and the supernatural was becoming increasingly thin, and I felt we were about to cross a boundary from which we might never return. The atmosphere around us became more oppressive with every step we took. The whisper that once seemed distant was now becoming a deafening chorus, echoing among the trees. Clara and I exchanged glances, the tension growing between us like an electric current. Fear began to morph into something deeper, a sense that we were being pulled into a bottomless abyss. As we moved forward, shadows danced around us, and a thick fog began to cover the forest floor. The air turned cold, and I could see my breath condensing into small puffs. Clara stopped abruptly, her eyes fixed on a point ahead. "Look," she murmured, her voice almost a whisper. I followed her gaze and saw what appeared to be a human silhouette in the distance. My heart raced. The figure, shrouded in shadows, stood still, as if watching us. It was a woman, but not the same one I had seen before. Her face was distorted, and her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, as if reflecting the pain of 1,000 lost souls. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice trembling. The echo of my question was swallowed by the fog, and the woman did not respond. Instead, she began to move slowly, as if floating, and the mist wrapped around her in a ghostly embrace. Sarah grabbed my arm, and I hesitated, but curiosity pushed me forward. "We need to find out what she wants," I whispered, feeling that this could be the key to understanding the disappearances. The figure stopped and, with a gentle gesture, seemed to invite us to follow. We crossed into the fog, and with each step, the sense of disorientation grew. It was as if the space around us was contorting, shaping itself according to the will of that entity. Clara and I exchanged nervous glances, but the determination in her eyes encouraged me to continue. Finally, we reached a clearing where the silhouette fully materialized. She was a woman of ethereal beauty, but there was a deep sadness in her gaze. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice soft yet laden with a weight that nearly knocked me over. "This place is not for the living. We are looking for answers," I replied, my voice almost fading amid the pressure I felt. "About the disappearances, about Eldergrove." The woman shook her head slowly, as if lamenting. "Eldergrove is a labyrinth, an echo of memories and pain. Those who enter rarely leave. They become part of the forest. But what about the others? What happened to them?" Clara asked, her voice firm but with a subtle tremor. The woman pointed to the forest around us. "The souls that wander here are trapped. They cannot find their way back. And you can also get lost if you are not careful." A wave of dread hit me. What did it mean to get lost? What would happen to us if we couldn't return? Before I could formulate a response, the figure began to fade, blending back into the mist. "The truth is hidden in the roots of the forest," she whispered as her presence dissipated. Clara pulled me and I followed, but the reality around us seemed to warp. The path we had taken was now covered by a tangle of roots, as if the forest was trying to ensnare us. The feeling of panic began to consume me. "We need to go back. We can't stay here," I shouted, but Clara was absorbed in another thought. "Wait, look at this." She crouched down to examine something on the ground. It was a piece of fabric similar to what I had seen before, but there was something more. A broken necklace with a pendant that looked familiar. "This is my sister's," Clara whispered, her voice filled with horror. "What?" I demanded, my heart racing uncontrollably. "You never mentioned you had a missing sister. She disappeared years ago, right here in this park," Clara replied, her eyes shining with tears. I thought it was just a legend, but now I don't know." The connection deepened, and the truth began to reveal itself like a distorted puzzle. The entity, the disappearances, Eldergrove. Everything seemed to revolve around Clara and her sister. What else was she not telling me? There were secrets intertwined with the very essence of this place, and I realized we were only scratching the surface. A new wave of whispers began to envelop us, and I felt that the forest was alive, pulsating like a heart. Time seemed to distort, and a sense of despair settled in. "We need to get out of here, Clara, now," I shouted, but she seemed paralyzed, caught between the pain of the past and the urgency of the present. The clearing around us began to darken, as if the forest itself was closing in on us. Fear took hold, but I knew that to escape, we would need to confront not only what was in front of us, but also the ghosts we carried within. And as the truth approached, I realized we were about to discover that the line between life and death, between reality and legend, was thinner than we could ever imagine. Despair grew within me like a shadow spreading, and the forest seemed to close in around us. Clara was paralyzed, her gaze distant as she held the piece of fabric as if it were the only anchor keeping her in the present. The clearing, once a space of revelations, was now becoming a trap, and I knew we needed to act before it was too late. "Clara, we need to go. Now," I shouted, my voice echoing in the mist surrounding us. But to my surprise, she didn't move. She was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, and I could see the internal struggle in her eyes. "Your sister, Clara. We need to find her," I pleaded, But what I didn't know was that the search for answers could lead us to an even darker fate. Then, as if the forest were responding to our despair, a chilling wind blew, bringing with it whispers that turned into screams. "Turn back! Turn back!" echoed around us. Panic took hold of me, and I pulled Clara, trying to drag her away from that cursed clearing. It was then that the woman from the mist appeared again, like a shadow stronger than before. "You cannot escape the truth," she screamed, her voice now a roar that reverberated in the depths of my mind. "The forest demands a price." "What price?" I shouted, feeling terror seize me. But instead of an answer, the woman advanced, and her bright eyes locked onto me with an intensity that made me tremble. "You are tied to Eldergrove in a way you do not yet understand. Each of them, each lost soul, is connected to you." "What are you talking about?" Clara asked, her voice now laden with confusion and fear. The woman raised her hand, and a vision began to form before us. I saw flashes of memories, faces of missing people, and among them, Clara's, younger, in a moment of happiness. But the scene quickly turned into a nightmare. I saw her sister, not as a victim, but as part of the forest itself, her eyes lost in darkness. "She didn't disappear, Clara. She became part of this place," the woman exclaimed, her voice now a lament. A sharp cold pierced my body. Her words settled in my mind, and a new understanding took shape. "Clara, your sister is not dead. She has become one with the forest," I said, horrified. You need to understand that the connection we have here is deeper than we imagined." Clara looked at me, and the pain on her face was palpable. Why? Why did this happen?" Tears streamed down her face, and I wished I could comfort her. But the truth was more cruel than anything I could say. Because the forest not only holds secrets but also feeds on them. It demands that the living be part of its story so that the missing are never forgotten. Each of them lives within it, and now you too are trapped in this cycle. The woman asserted, her gaze now softer, almost sad. The clearing began to spin, and I realized we were in a place of transition, where the lines between life and death were dissolving. "If you don't step away, Clara, you will also become one of those lost souls," I shouted, urgency growing within me. But the darkest revelation was yet to come. The woman extended her hand, and suddenly, a clearer vision took shape. I saw Clara, not just as a seeker of answers, but as the final key to the freedom of all those souls. The forest needed her to break free from its cycle of pain. "You are the connection," I whispered, understanding that Clara's very life could be the answer to all the disappearances. "If you don't step away, you could be the next to get lost. But if you can confront this pain, you could free your sister and all the others." Clara looked at the woman, and determination began to shine in her eyes. "Then tell me what I need to do," she said, her voice firm, as if a new strength had awakened within her. But before the woman could respond, the forest began to tremble, as if reacting to our dialogue. The mist thickened around us, and screams echoed once more. "You must choose. Stay or fight. Time is running out." The tension mounted, and I realized that Clara's choice would be the key to our escape or our condemnation. "Clara," I shouted, but she was preparing to confront whatever lay hidden in the depths of the forest. My mind was spinning, and I knew that the truth we were about to uncover would change everything. It was an abyss of choices, where every step could be the last. And so, as the mist closed in around us, I braced myself for whatever would come next, aware that the struggle for survival had only just begun. The fog closed in around us like a prison, and the air became increasingly difficult to breathe. Clara was determined, and I saw in her eyes a resolve I hardly recognized. But as she prepared to face the darkness, I found myself in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. What should I do? Let Clara go alone in search of her sister, or risk everything to save her from the same fate? "Clara, you don't have to do this alone," I shouted, the urgency in my voice echoing in the clearing. Fear consumed me, but I couldn't let her leave without a fight. Whatever was behind that fog and those screams was not something I could allow her to face alone. I remembered the stories I had heard about Eldergrove, about what the forest could do to those who dared to challenge its secrets. That woman, the shadow, seemed to be a vital part of it all. What exactly did she want from us? The woman approached, her eyes shining with a supernatural intensity. You must choose, boy. What are you willing to sacrifice to save her? Her voice became a whisper, almost seductive, but there was a weight to it that paralyzed me. What was I willing to sacrifice? The question echoed in my mind, and the answer seemed to fade into the fog. I don't know, I shouted, frustration growing within me. But I can't let her go. Clara. I looked at her and realized that the strength within her now radiated a light, a hope I didn't want to extinguish. But the forest was alive, pulsing around us, and I felt like I could be swallowed by his claws at any moment. If you don't fight, she will stay here forever. The woman of the fog shouted, her voice now a storm. Your fears, your weaknesses, all of it will be used against you. Her words resonated within me, and I realized that my own fears were paralyzing me. What did I fear most? Losing Clara or confronting the truth that lay before me? I couldn't allow the forest to dominate me, to drag me into its abyss of despair. Clara, you need to remember your sister. What did she love most? I shouted, trying to bring Clara back to her essence. She hesitated, the pain in her gaze transforming into a spark of remembrance. She loved flowers, always said they brought hope, Clara replied, her voice beginning to resonate with a new purpose. Then let's use that. The forest feeds on pain, but also on love. Let's show it that we are not here to succumb, but to fight. The idea emerged like a light in the darkness. If we could invoke the strength of what Clara and her sister had, the forest could be appeased. Clara nodded, and together we began to focus. My mind filled with images of her childhood, moments of joy and love that surrounded her sister. Flowers, let's do this, I shouted, and the fog began to stir around us. And then, as if the forest itself was listening, flowers sprouted around us, an explosion of vibrant colors that defied the darkness. The petals danced in the wind, and the essence of hope spread like a sweet perfume. But the forest's resistance was palpable. The wind turned into a gale, and the whispers transformed into deafening screams, trying to divert us from our path. Don't stop. Keep going, I shouted, as the force of the forest tried to knock us down. My own insecurities began to surface, a wave of doubts flooding me. What was going through my mind? What if we couldn't do it? What if all of this was in vain? The internal battle intensified, and I found myself fighting against the very essence of fear. I'm not enough, I shouted to myself, but Clara's voice reached me. You are. Fight for me, for us. Her determination revitalized me, and I realized that I was not just fighting for her, but for the freedom of all those lost souls. I looked at the flowers surrounding us and then, with all the intensity one could muster, raised my voice. We are not just victims of this forest. We are part of it, and today we choose the light. With each word, the clearing began to glow, the flowers casting a light that defied the darkness. But the woman of the fog opposed us, her figure twisting in palpable despair. You have no idea what you are doing. The forest does not forgive. You are risking everything. Her voice echoed with a threat, and a wave of fear almost made me hesitate. But I couldn't stop. I looked at Clara and saw the strength she had found. Come on, Clara, for your sister, for all the souls, let the light prevail. And together we began to chant, an invocation to the love that existed between sisters, the love that could break the chains of pain. The forest roared, and the wind turned into a hurricane, but we did not back down. The light grew, and with it, the feeling that we were about to break the barriers that imprisoned us. The woman's scream turned into a lament as the shadows around us began to dissipate. But what did this mean? Were we truly succeeding? The clearing spun, and I felt time running out. Whatever happened next, I knew there was no turning back. We were about to face the truth, and the closer we got, the clearer it became that our struggle was just beginning. The fog grew sicker, as if it were alive, trying to swallow us whole. The wind howled, and the flowers that once shone with hope now seemed to wilt under the pressure of what was to come. The woman of the fog, with her eyes that looked like windows to an abyss, moved toward us, her lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You are fools. Love cannot save what is already lost." "No, you don't understand," I shouted, my voice faltering under the rising pressure. "Love is what keeps us going, is what gives meaning to all of this." But as I spoke, doubt began to seep into my mind. What if she was right? What if Clara and her sister were already doomed? "You are weak," the woman of the fog laughed, a sound that sliced through the air like a blade. "Your weakness is your condemnation. You cannot save anyone. Just accept your powerlessness." The shadows around me stirred, forming distorted figures that seemed to represent my worst fears. Loneliness, loss, the inability to protect those I love. But as the darkness threatened to swallow me, I looked at Clara. She was there, steadfast, despite the storm around us. "Remember what you love, Clara. Remember your sister," I shouted, feeling the need to anchor our struggle in something greater than ourselves. The love Clara felt for her sister was a palpable force, and I felt it pulsating between us like an electric current. She always believed that the flowers talked to her," Clara said, her voice a little stronger. "She always said they had stories to tell." The memory ignited a flame in her eyes, and I realized that their connection was more powerful than any shadow trying to bind us. "Then let's make the flowers talk," I challenged, feeling the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Let's invoke the essence of what they represent." With a determined gesture, I began to focus, calling forth each memory, each shared laugh, each moment of love between Clara and her sister. The flowers around us began to stir, and I saw them raising their petals, as if responding to our call. The vibrant colors intensified, and a wave of light began to radiate from us, a response to the challenge the woman of the fog had thrown. "You think you can change what the forest is?" The woman screamed, her voice now a furious growl. "The forest is older than you. It feeds on pain and despair. You cannot fight against that." But I felt the strength growing within me, a determination that could not be contained. "We are part of it," I shouted back, my voice echoing in the clearing. "And we will not allow you to define us. You may be a shadow, but we are light." The woman of the fog advanced, her figure distorting in a whirlwind of anger and despair. "You don't know what you're doing." She hurled a wave of shadow in our direction, a desperate attack to silence us. But instead of backing down, I felt Clara at my side, her presence strengthening my resolve. "Clara," I called, and as we united, a wave of light exploded from us, a blinding glow that illuminated the clearing. The shadows momentarily dispersed, and I saw the woman of the fog hesitate, her face contorted in a look of horror. "This cannot be," she screamed as the light advanced, swallowing the darkness around us. But instead of retreating, I moved forward as well, determined to confront her. "The light is not just a choice, it's a force. You may try to control us, but we are stronger together." The flowers began to transform, their colors intensifying, and a soft melody started to echo in the clearing, a song that spoke of love, hope, and freedom. The woman of the fog was now surrounded, the light emanating from us like a beacon against the storm. The fear that once dominated her was turning into despair, and I saw that the truth was about to be revealed. "You cannot imprison us. Your shadow is nothing without our fear," I shouted, my voice tearing through the air. And as the light grew, the shadows began to dissipate, revealing the truth that was hidden. The woman of the fog was not just an evil force, but also a guardian of pain and loss, trapped in her own cycle of despair. "Free yourself," Clara shouted, and in that moment, I realized that the true battle was not just against the woman of the fog, but against the fear that imprisoned us. If we could free her from her own pain, perhaps we could find the peace we sought. The light exploded in one final climax, and the fog dissipated, revealing the clearing in all its glory. I saw Clara by my side, and together, with one last cry of love and determination, We faced the woman of the fog, not as enemies, but as those seeking healing. And in that instant, the forest changed. The flowers bloomed, the light shone, and the once oppressive fog dissipated, leaving only a soft echo of hope in the air. What I had feared transformed into freedom, and the true struggle, which began with love, had triumphed. The light that burst into the clearing slowly dissipated, and as the mist cleared, I fell to my knees, exhausted. My heart was pounding in my chest, and the adrenaline coursing through my veins was now turning into a deep and overwhelming fatigue. Clara was by my side, breathing heavily, but her eyes were filled with a new determination, a spark of hope that still ignited. What we had just faced was not merely a battle against the woman of the mist, but a struggle against our own shadows. And although we had triumphed, the victory had a bitter taste. The clearing, now illuminated, seemed to shine in its beauty, but I knew that what we experienced was etched into our souls. I lifted my gaze and looked around us. The flowers that had been wilted now danced softly in the wind, their vibrant colors contrasting with the pallor of the mist that had dissipated. But there was a deep sadness within me. The woman of the mist was no longer there, but the feeling of loss and the pain she carried remained. In an instant, I understood that she was not merely a villain. She was a reflection of what so many of us feel in moments of despair. "Are you okay?" Clara asked, her voice soft and concerned. "Yes, but I don't know if this is really over," I replied, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. What happened here was not just a battle. It was as if we had touched something very deep, something we cannot simply ignore. She nodded, and I could see that she was also grappling with the same unease. The emotional scars of the battle were not visible, but they were etched in our hearts. The feeling that something still lingered in the air, a shadow hidden deep in the forest, would not leave me. "What are we going to do now?" I asked, the uncertainty weighing on us. "We need to remember," Clara said, looking at the flowers that now shone brightly. "We need to tell her story, the story of the woman of the mist. If we don't do that, she may come back, and the pain we felt could repeat itself." The thought that the woman might return made me shudder. If she had been a guardian of pain, she could not simply disappear. There was a lesson to be learned. The pain we face does not vanish, but it can be transformed. I felt my body tire, not just physically, but emotionally. What I had faced was not merely an external struggle, but an internal battle. I had seen the abyss, and it had looked back at me. The light that burst forth was a victory, but it brought to the surface questions I was not prepared to confront. In the days that followed, the forest began to heal, and the flowers bloomed under the sunlight. But still, there was a shadow that accompanied me. Whenever I found myself alone, I felt the presence of the woman of the mist, as if she were watching me, waiting. The nights were the hardest. The whispers of the wind seemed to carry her words, and I knew that the battle would never be completely forgotten. The memories of that night became a part of me, and I realized that, although we had freed the forest from its oppression, we could not escape what we had lived through. Love and pain coexisted, and I could no longer look at nature in the same way. There was a beauty in the scars, a strength in the wounds that shaped us. Clara and I continued to meet, sharing stories and memories, but there was a space between us, an invisible barrier that hadn't existed before. We knew that victory came at a cost, and the connection that had once been so strong was now tinged with a melancholy we could not ignore. And so, while the forest continued to bloom, I realized that the true battle was not just against the woman of the mist, but against the very ghosts that haunted us. Life would never be the same again, and somewhere deep in the forest, the woman of the mist still whispered, a reminder that even the brightest light can be overshadowed by persistent shadows. The clearing was now a place of light and color, but inside me, the shadows were gathering. The battle with the woman of the mist may have ended, but the real struggle was just beginning. Clara and I separated after that night, each dealing with the wounds in our own way. I spent hours wandering through the forest, searching for answers that seemed to evade me with every step. What had I learned? What did it really mean to win? As days turned into weeks, I realized that pain was not a burden to carry, but an intrinsic part of who I was. Each emotional scar, each tear shed, shaped my being. The woman of the mist was not just an enemy. She was a symbol of what I was trying to deny. By confronting her, I was also confronting my own vulnerability. One night, as the moon illuminated the forest with its silvery glow, I decided to revisit the clearing. A gentle breeze swayed the flowers, and for a brief moment, I felt a familiar comfort. I sat on the ground, surrounded by this renewed beauty, and a sense of peace began to wash over me. But suddenly, a shadow crossed my field of vision. A shiver ran down my spine, and I knew that the presence of the woman of the mist was still there, even if invisible. "You can't leave me," I murmured to the emptiness. "What do you want from me?" The answer came in the form of a whisper that seemed to envelop the surroundings. An ethereal voice, almost like an echo, telling me that pain would never completely disappear. But there was a choice. I could let it define me, or I could use it as a springboard for transformation. I took a deep breath, and in a moment of clarity, I realized that the woman of the mist was not an evil entity, but a guardian of the emotions that many of us prefer to ignore. She was the guardian of pain, sadness, fear, but also of hope and resilience. What I had faced was a part of the human process. The acceptance that life is made of ups and downs, of light and shadows. In that moment, a new determination blossomed within me. I didn't just want to survive. I wanted to live fully. I stood up with the certainty that the battle was not lost, but transformed. What I had learned could be shared. In the following days, I began to tell the story of the woman of the mist, not as a villain, but as a symbol of struggle and resilience. I inspired others to confront their own shadows, to not fear pain, but to embrace it as a valuable part of the journey. What had started as a nightmare transformed into a current of hope. The light that broke through in the clearing was not just a momentary victory, but a flame that could illuminate the paths of others. And so, the forest continued to thrive, and so did I. I understood that light and darkness coexist, and we find strength by accepting the complexity of life. The woman of the mist was no longer a ghost haunting me, but an ally, a constant reminder that true strength comes from vulnerability. Yet, as I walked away from the clearing, a sense of unease still lingered. I knew that the pain we face never completely disappears. It transforms, evolves, but it will always be there, reminding us of our humanity. And in a corner of the forest, the woman of the mist might still be watching, perhaps waiting for those who had yet to learn the lesson. I invite you to reflect on your own battles and how they have shaped who you are today. Have you faced your shadows? Share your experiences in the comments. Together, let's transform pain into strength and vulnerability into connection. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the depths of the human condition. Your participation is essential for us to create a space where light and darkness can coexist, and where each of us can find strength in our own journey.